Bolu had always believed in love, but her journey through the maze of relationships had left her heart bruised and her hope waning. Friends and family often told her that the right man would come along when she least expected it. But Bolu had grown impatient. In a moment of desperation, she decided to try online dating, a suggestion that had been floated by her friends more times than she could count. Signing up was easy, and soon Bolu's profile was live. Within days, she was inundated with messages from handsome men from all corners of the world. Though flattered, Bolu couldn't help but hope for someone from her own country, someone who understood her culture and values. Then she received a message from Kojo, a strikingly handsome Ghanaian man. His profile revealed that he was a pilot, born and raised in the United States. Intrigued by his background, Bolu decided to reply. Their conversation flowed effortlessly, and she was delighted to discover they had so much in common. They both loved adventure, shared a passion for culinary arts, and had a deep appreciation for family values. As their connection grew stronger, Kojo mentioned he would be flying to Nigeria soon and suggested they meet. Nervous yet excited, Bolu agreed. When the day finally arrived, Bolu felt a mix of anticipation and nerves. But the moment she saw Kojo at the airport, her anxiety melted away. It was love at first sight. His warm smile and confident demeanor reassured her that this was the beginning of something special. Their first meeting was brief but magical. Kojo took Bolu to a fine dining restaurant, where they shared a candlelit dinner, surrounded by the soft glow of chandeliers and the soothing hum of classical music. He surprised her with expensive gifts, a delicate gold necklace and a bouquet of her favorite flowers. They spent a lovely evening together, talking about their dreams and aspirations, laughing like old friends. As the evening drew to a close, Kojo accompanied Bolu back to her apartment. The connection they felt was undeniable, and they decided to spend the night together. It was a night filled with tenderness and passion, sealing the bond that had already begun to form between them. The next day, Kojo had to leave for work. As a pilot, his job demanded frequent travel, but they promised to keep in touch. True to their word, they called, texted, and video chatted every day. Their bond growing stronger despite the distance. Bolu felt happier than she had in years, cherishing every moment they spent together, even if it was virtual. 3 months into their relationship, Bolu began feeling unwell. After visiting her doctor, she received unexpected news. She was pregnant. A whirlwind of emotions hit her: joy, fear, confusion. She was scared to tell Kojo, fearing he might think she had gotten pregnant on purpose to trap him into being with her. Bolu considered all possible reactions, but decided she had to tell him the truth. One evening, with her heart pounding, Bolu video called Kojo. She could see the excitement in his eyes, but she felt a lump in her throat. She took a deep breath and told him about the pregnancy. She even suggested an abortion, afraid that he might not want the baby. To her surprise, Kojo's face lit up with joy. He was thrilled at the news and wanted to keep the baby. Bolu's fears began to dissipate, but she was firm about one thing. She wasn't going to settle for just being a baby mama. She wanted a family, a stable home for her child. Seeing the determination in her eyes, Kojo knew what he had to do. He didn't hesitate. "Bolu," he said, taking a deep breath, "I love you more than anything. Let's not just be parents. Let's be a family. Will you marry me?" Tears filled Bolu's eyes as she nodded, unable to speak. Kojo's proposal was everything she had dreamed of. Bolu shared the joyous news with her family and friends, who were thrilled for her. Their excitement was palpable, and everyone eagerly awaited the wedding. As Bolu and Kojo began planning for their big day, they encountered their first major difference in vision. Kojo insisted on a small, intimate, and very elaborate wedding with just a few close friends and family, valuing quality over quantity. This was contrary to Bolu's lifelong dream of a grand wedding, surrounded by hundreds of guests celebrating in a lavish setting. Bolu's family, who had money and were more than willing to sponsor a lavish wedding and party, also leaned towards the idea of a big celebration. However, Kojo remained steadfast in his desire for a smaller ceremony. He believed in the intimacy and significance of a wedding shared with only those closest to them. After many discussions and considerations, Bolu decided to respect Kojo's wishes, recognizing the importance of compromise in their relationship. The wedding, though small, was nothing short of magical. With only a handful of friends and family present, the atmosphere was filled with love and warmth. Every detail was meticulously planned, and the day was perfect in its simplicity and elegance. Bolu wore a stunning dress that made her feel like a queen, and Kojo looked dashing in his tailored suit. Their vows were heartfelt, and there wasn't a dry eye in the room. Soon after the wedding, Bolu made the significant move to the United States to join her husband. The transition was smooth thanks to Kojo's unwavering support and the love they shared. Bolu quickly adapted to her new life, and a few months later, Bolu gave birth to a beautiful baby girl. The arrival of their daughter brought an overwhelming sense of happiness and completion to their lives. Holding her baby for the first time, Bolu felt a deep sense of contentment and gratitude for the journey that had led her to this moment. However, 2 years later, trouble started brewing in paradise. Kojo's job as a pilot kept him away from home more often than not, and his frequent absences strained their marriage. His constant excuses about work left Bolu feeling lonely and neglected, craving the companionship and intimacy that had once defined their relationship. One weekend, overwhelmed by loneliness and the lack of physical affection, Bolu decided she needed a break. She hired a nanny to look after her daughter and ventured to a nearby bar to unwind. She intended to have a few drinks and enjoy some dancing, hoping to shake off the urge for intimacy. Unfortunately, Bolu ended up having too many drinks. In her drunken state, she followed a man home, and they had sex. The next morning, she woke up in a stranger's bed, her heart racing as she realized what had happened. Bolu quickly gathered her things, except for her bag, and dashed home, worried sick about her child. Hours later, her phone rang. The kind stranger had found her contact details in her bag and called to return it. Embarrassed, Bolu reluctantly accepted his offer to drop it off at her place. When he arrived, she saw him clearly in the light of day. He was undeniably handsome, but the situation felt awkward, and they both exchanged a few polite words before parting ways. Days turned into weeks, and the incident weighed heavily on Bolu's mind. She felt guilty and conflicted, unsure of how to address the growing distance between her and Kojo. Their conversations became strained, and she struggled with the secret of her infidelity. One evening, unable to bear the guilt any longer, Bolu decided to talk to Kojo. She needed to express her feelings about his constant absence and the impact it had on their marriage. As they sat down for a rare dinner together, Bolu took a deep breath and started, "Kojo, we need to talk." Kojo looked at her, sensing the seriousness in her tone. "What's wrong, babe?" She hesitated, then continued, "I feel like we're drifting apart. You're always away, and I feel so alone. I need you here, with us." Kojo sighed, rubbing his temples. "I know, babe. My job is demanding, but I'm doing this for us, for our future." "I understand," she replied, her voice trembling, "but we can't go on like this. We need to find a balance. Our marriage is suffering, and it's not just me. Our daughter needs you too." Kojo's eyes softened, and he reached for her hand. "You're right. I'll talk to my superiors and see if I can get a more stable schedule. I don't want to lose you, Bolu." Relieved by his words, Bolu felt a glimmer of hope. They agreed to work on their relationship, promising to make more time for each other and their daughter. Bolu knew it would take time and effort, but she was willing to try. She decided not to tell Kojo about her indiscretion, hoping to leave that mistake in the past and focus on rebuilding their bond. Despite her efforts to reconnect with Kojo and salvage their marriage, He remained distant and absent, leaving her feeling neglected and alone. It was during one of those lonely nights that she found herself scrolling through her phone and coming across the number of the stranger she had been with that first night. In a moment of weakness and longing for companionship, she dialed his number. To her surprise, he picked up almost immediately, his voice warm and welcoming. "I've been waiting for you to call, stranger," he said teasingly, which made Bolu smile. They started talking, reminiscing about their encounters and eventually planning to meet up for another drink. Their meeting quickly escalated, leading to them having sex again, this time in the restroom of the bar. What started as a one-night stand had now become a series of clandestine encounters at various spots around town. Bolu found herself drawn to Addo's charisma and the escape he provided from her troubled marriage. As time passed, Bolu realized with a sinking feeling that she was pregnant again. This time, however, the baby wasn't Kojo's. It was Addo's. She knew she had to tell him, so she asked to meet up. Addo invited her over to his place, where they had been meeting sporadically to keep their affair secret from their respective lives. When Bolu arrived, she wasn't her usual cheerful self, and Addo attempted to cheer her up. But her mind was elsewhere. As Addo went to fetch drinks from his fridge, she glanced around the room and noticed several pictures on the wall. Among them, she spotted a wedding photo, a familiar face smiling beside Addo. It was Kojo, her husband, dressed in his pilot uniform, with another woman by his side. Confusion and shock gripped Bolu as she pointed at the photo. "Who is this?" she asked, her voice trembling. Addo turned around slowly, his expression unreadable for a moment. "That's my baby brother, Kojo," he finally said, his voice tinged with bitterness. "He's a decorated pilot, married to an Australian woman. They have 3 children together." Bolu's heart sank. The man she had been having an affair and was pregnant with his child was Kojo's brother. Bolu's world shattered as the truth unfolded before her. Sobbing uncontrollably, she struggled to process the devastating revelation. Addo, equally bewildered and confused, listened as Bolu poured out her heart and told Addo the truth about her marriage to Kojo. As Bolu continued to cry, Addo's mind raced with the disbelief of what he had just learned. He hadn't attended Kojo's wedding to Bolu because of the deep rift caused by Kojo's adulterous betrayal with Addo's own wife, leading to their divorce. Now, in a cruel twist of fate, Bolu realized she was married to a man who had betrayed both his brother and her. "I didn't know," Bolu choked out between sobs, her voice raw with anguish. "I didn't know any of this." Addo struggled to find words, grappling with the complexity of the situation. "I didn't know you were his wife," he finally managed to say, his voice strained. "I didn't know." Silence hung heavy in the room as they both absorbed the enormity of the truth. Bolu felt a mix of emotions: betrayal, confusion, and a deep sense of regret. She had unknowingly entangled herself in a web of lies and deceit, her marriage and her affair now intertwined in a heartbreaking mess. "I'm pregnant," Bolu whispered, her voice barely audible amidst her tears. "And it's yours, Addo." Addo's face paled, his own shock mirroring Bolu's anguish. "Pregnant?" he asked quietly, his voice trembling. "What are we going to do?" he asked quietly, his voice trembling. Bolu wiped her tears, her mind racing with thoughts of her daughter, her marriage to Kojo, and the devastating impact of her choices. She knew she had to confront Kojo, to unravel the tangled threads of their lives and face the consequences of her actions. A few days later, Bolu mustered the courage to confront Kojo. She waited for him to return from one of his rare trips home, her heart pounding in her chest. When he walked through the door, she took a deep breath and stepped forward. "Kojo, we need to talk," she said, her voice steady despite the turmoil inside her. Kojo looked at her, sensing the seriousness in her tone. "What is it now, Bolu?" he asked, his voice tinged with irritation. Bolu took a deep breath, steeling herself. "I've discovered something, Kojo. something that changes everything. Kojo's eyes narrowed. What are you talking about? I know about your past, she said, her voice shaking. I know about Addo. I know you were already married and that you caused his divorce by sleeping with his wife. And now, I'm pregnant, but the baby isn't yours. It's Addo's. The room fell silent as Kojo processed her words. Instead of the remorse or shock Bolu expected, Kojo's face hardened. He crossed his arms and stared at her coldly. So, you found out, he said flatly, and you decided to have an affair with my brother to get back at me. Brilliant move, Bolu. Bolu's eyes widened in disbelief. That's not what happened. I didn't know who Addo was until it was too late. But what about you, Kojo? How could you deceive me like this? How could you betray your own brother and marry me under false pretenses? Kojo shrugged, his expression unremorseful. You were desperate, Bolu. You wanted to get married so badly that you jumped at the first opportunity. We barely knew each other, but you forced the marriage on me. What did you expect? Tears streamed down Bolu's face as she listened to his callous words. I loved you, Kojo. I thought we could build a life together. Kojo scoffed. Love? This was never about love. It was about convenience. You got pregnant after one meeting, and you used that to trap me into marrying you. Now look where we are. Bolu felt a deep sense of betrayal and heartache. She realized that the man she had once believed in was nothing more than a deceitful opportunist. I won't let you destroy me or my child, she said, her voice firm. I will find a way to move on and protect my children, even if it means doing it alone. Kojo's eyes glinted with a mixture of disdain and amusement. Good luck with that, Bolu. You're going to need it, Kojo sneered, because I am going to fight you for the custody of my daughter, you cheat. Bolu's anger flared. You're delusional if you think you can take her away from me. You're never here, Kojo. You don't know the first thing about raising her. Their argument quickly escalated, voices rising in the small living room. Kojo's face twisted with rage, and in a moment of uncontrollable fury, he slapped Bolu across the face. The impact sent her staggering back, her cheeks stinging and her eyes filling with tears. The man she had married was a stranger now, a far cry from the loving partner she had hoped for. As she gathered herself, she saw Kojo storm into their daughter's bedroom. Panic surged through her as she watched him pick up their little girl and head for the door. Kojo, stop! You can't take her! Bolu screamed, but he ignored her, determination etched on his face. Desperate, Bolu grabbed her phone and dialed 911, her hands shaking. Help! My husband is trying to take my daughter. He's not safe. Please, hurry. Within minutes, the sound of police sirens filled the air. As Kojo sped off with their daughter in his car, Bolu prayed the authorities would arrive in time. The police pursued Kojo for a long distance, their cars weaving through traffic in a high-speed chase. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the police managed to corner Kojo's car. They blocked his path, forcing him to stop. Officers quickly surrounded the vehicle, guns drawn, and ordered Kojo to step out. Bolu watched from a distance, her heart pounding in her chest. When Kojo finally emerged from the car, an officer gently took their daughter and brought her to safety. Bolu ran to her, scooping her up into a tight embrace, tears streaming down her face. It's okay, baby. Mummy's here, Bolu whispered, holding her daughter close. The relief was overwhelming, but she knew the battle was far from over. Kojo was handcuffed and placed in the back of a police car, his face a mask of anger and frustration. As the police took him away, Bolu felt a mix of emotions, fear, relief, and a renewed determination to protect her family. She called Addo, who rushed to the police station to pick them up. Just as they were about to leave, Kojo, being escorted by the police, caught sight of Addo. A sneer crossed Kojo's face. Well, if it isn't the brother, he said loudly, his voice dripping with sarcasm. Here to rescue your lover, Addo. Seems like you finally got your revenge for me sleeping with your wife. Now we're even. Addo's face turned red with fury. "You think this is some kind of game, Kojo? This isn't about revenge. It's about your lies and deceit. You're a disgrace." Kojo laughed, unremorseful and defiant. "You always were too soft, Addo. Look at you now, trying to play the hero. Pathetic." The tension between the brothers escalated quickly. Addo lunged forward, and the two men nearly came to blows. Bolu, desperate to avoid further conflict, stepped in, trying to separate them. The police officers intervened, pulling Addo back as he struggled against their hold. "Enough!" one of the officers shouted. "This isn't the time or place." Addo, breathing heavily, reluctantly allowed himself to be led away. Bolu, still shaken, held tightly to her daughter as they walked out of the police station. Addo's anger simmered just below the surface, but he tried to calm himself for Bolu's sake. As they drove away from the station, Bolu glanced at Addo, seeing the hurt and betrayal etched on his face. "I'm so sorry, Addo," she whispered. "I didn't know any of this would happen." Addo sighed, his grip on the steering wheel tightening. "It's not your fault, Bolu. Kojo has always been a manipulative bastard. But we need to focus on what's important now, keeping you and your daughter safe." Bolu nodded, appreciating his support. "Thank you, Addo. I don't know what I would have done without you." They reached Addo's apartment, a temporary refuge from the chaos that had engulfed their lives. As they settled in, Bolu felt a sense of security she hadn't known in a long time. Despite the turmoil, Bolu found solace in Addo's presence. Yet, the weight of everything that had transpired constantly made her cry, leaving her confused about how to proceed with her life and how to tell her family about this tragedy. Bolu and Addo, now entangled in their affair, agreed to keep the baby while they figured out their next steps. Addo allowed her to stay at his place to ensure their security. One day, as Bolu was tidying up, she stumbled upon Addo keeping his gun in a compartment in the living room. The sight unnerved her, but she understood his need for protection, given the volatile situation with Kojo. The custody battle went to court, and Bolu won custody of their daughter. This victory infuriated Kojo, who, despite being issued a restraining order, continued to harass and threaten Bolu. His spiteful attempts to forcefully take their daughter became more frequent and desperate. One afternoon, when Addo had gone out, leaving Bolu and their baby home alone, Kojo broke into the house. Bolu's heart raced as she tried to shield her daughter. Kojo, filled with rage, attacked Bolu, beating her mercilessly. As he was about to take their daughter away, Bolu's thoughts raced back to the gun Addo had hidden in the living room. Driven by a mix of fear, anger, and desperation, Bolu scrambled to the compartment, retrieved the gun, and pointed it at Kojo. Her hands shook, but she steadied herself, her mind focused on protecting her child. "Stop, Kojo!" she screamed, her voice hoarse with emotion. "Don't make me do this." Kojo turned, a sneer on his bloodied face. "You wouldn't dare," he spat. But Bolu had had enough. As Kojo lunged towards her, she pulled the trigger, the sound of the gunshot echoing through the house. Kojo fell to the ground, lifeless. Bolu stood there, shaking, the gun slipping from her grasp as she sank to her knees, tears streaming down her face. Moments later, Addo returned, horrified by the scene before him. He rushed to Bolu, wrapping his arms around her as she sobbed uncontrollably. "It's over, Bolu," he whispered. "You're safe now." The police arrived shortly after, and Bolu was taken in for questioning. The investigation revealed the extent of Kojo's abusive behavior and his repeated violations of the restraining order. Bolu was eventually cleared of wrongdoing, deemed to have acted in self-defense. In the aftermath, Bolu and Addo faced the difficult task of rebuilding their lives. The trauma of the past weighed heavily on them, but their shared experiences brought them closer together. Bolu focused on healing and providing a stable, loving environment for her children, with Addo by her side.